I'm here today to talk with you about resume and interview skills in the job search. And when I say the job search, of course, we're going to focus on a job search in the United States and what some of the customs and conventions are that people expect, because they do vary widely by country. And as recent as about 2 or 3 years ago, I would see British-style resumes that, because, you know, England conquered the world, right? And then eventually left, like they did the United States. But they left a lot behind. So the English resume convention that I was seeing until recently still had things like eye color, marital status, height, weight, all those things that used to go on a US resume for some reason. And all of that is now it's illegal to ask, and no employer wants to see it on a resume. So as we go through this, you'll have an opportunity to see what a resume looks like and a cover letter. And when we talk about the interview, we'll do a little interaction to kind of get things moving along a little bit. So I want to start out by talking about the resume and what a resume is all about. A lot of people think that a resume is my history. It's what I have done, right? But in reality, I want you to think quite differently about it. Think of a resume as your marketing document for an interview, right? You're going to give that to people. You're going to talk to people about your resume. You may send your resume out online. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a while too, but what you're really doing with your resume is trying to convince the reader that you are a person that they should interview. So you have to shift your focus from this is my resume and my history to what does the employer want, what does the job description say, and how do I model my resume to fit that? Assuming that you know and you've already decided that it's a job that you can do, that you're interested in, that you have the skill set for and the motivation. So I listed some things that resumes do for you. Typically, they show your recent accomplishments. And I always put the word recent in there because people really want to know what you've done, maybe in the last 10 years, but as a new graduate, of course, it's only the last few years. So if you have work experience before you started school, some of that older work experience may or may not apply. It depends on the situation. Give the reader a sense of who you are, your strengths, skills, and abilities. So again, you have to think marketing. How do I convince this person that they should invite me in for an interview? Demonstrate your qualifications for the position. Market yourself for an interview, which is what we've been talking about, and outline key talking points for the interview. So when I say that, a lot of questions that people will ask you in an interview are going to be about you, right? So if you're writing a resume about yourself, learn to focus on the personal qualities and strengths that you want people to know about and that you want to talk to them about in the interview. That way, your resume is consistent with your interview message. Okay, resume design. I love this page. I'll give you all a half hour to read this and then we'll go on. Just joking. We're not going to read it at all. You all have the handout. But there's some information here on resume design that I think is helpful. For example, some people ask, you know, I'm an art major. Can I use robin blue paper? Robin's egg blue, I guess it would be. The answer is no. You always use white. Keep your formatting consistent throughout your resume. Look for balanced margins and maintain some white space. So without reading all of this, those are the key elements. You want a page that somebody's going to look at, and before they start reading a thing, the page looks attractive because it's well designed. And well designed means simple, straightforward, white space so that their eye can flow through the resume. HR directors tell us that they spend now 10 to 12 seconds reading a resume. So that'll give you some idea of how much time you have to catch their attention and why a simple, straightforward design is important. Yes?
Excuse me. If people have questions, do you want them to raise their hand now or wait until you're all finished?
Carla, I wish you would wait until later,
know,
but
I was
anybody,
about to-
no, I'm joking.
I was
I'm joking with you.
right off the bat.
Yes, thank you. I should have said that. Interrupt me anytime you want. Please, join the conversation. We hand out a lot of sample resumes, and they can relate to just about any major, but it's just to give some guidance on what a resume looks like. So there is nothing that's cast in concrete about this. So for example, as a new graduate, you typically put your education at the top of the resume. That's what you're marketing now. If you have academic honors, list that. If not, but you've done community activities, then list community activities. What I'm saying, in other words, is that these headings belong to you. So you develop headings in your resume that fit your experience and what you want the reader to know. Does that make sense? Any questions about that? Okay. So again, this is a sample, but you don't have to follow it in this exact format. And always start with a blank page in Microsoft Word. Don't use templates. Because if you use templates, they lock you into a format that when you go back to make some changes because you have some updates, you can't do it very often. And things get kind of twisted, and you have to go back and start with a blank sheet of paper anyway. So if you just do this in Microsoft Word, make it straightforward, keep it simple, you'll have a resume that you can then continue to update for the rest of your life. So one of the things I want to point out is that the most critical part of a resume typically is in the bullet points. And that's where you're marketing your experiences and what you've accomplished for an employer. So when you look at apparel merchandising intern, for example, learned the retail marketing chain from design trends to purchasing and merchandising. So this was something that someone did as an internship, and what are they saying there? They're saying, I know what this is all about. I really learned a lot about merchandising, and that's a transferable skill. Attended management meetings on pricing and sales. It might be even better to say participated in management meetings. And you'll notice that each of these bullet points starts with an action verb in past tense because it puts you in motion. It says, I was there, I was interactive, I was not just an observer. Performed internal study, provided direct customer sales and service. You get the idea, right? Does that make sense to everyone? Any questions about that? I still see people write paragraphs, little paragraphs that describe what they did. The problem is, in a rapidly moving world where most of our interaction is by computer or handheld portable devices, people don't read paragraphs anymore. So keep it very direct, brief, to the point business language that demonstrates your strengths and skills, especially those that are transferable to another position. So that's all about resumes. And I think one of the handouts, yeah, you have another sample cover letter in addition to the one that's in here, which I like a lot. But again, in a cover letter, you're marketing yourself. So you don't want to duplicate what you've already put in your resume, but what you want to do is summarize what you know about the job, the company, very briefly, how you see yourself fitting in, and what your skill sets are for the position that you're applying for. This relates back to the resume. People still ask, should I put like a mission statement in my resume? My advice is don't do it. Because if you say, my goal is to become an excellent employee of a company where I can learn a lot and make a decent income, what are you saying? I'm thinking about myself here, right? The employer wants you to think about them. So just leave it out. When you write a cover letter, that's your objective statement. Your objective is to get an interview for this position that you're applying for. So if you've got an objective statement, please take it out. Again, HR people tell us that they are a waste of time and they don't even bother reading them. So tell the reader what you're applying for, where you learned about it, and why you are interested in the first paragraph. That's the whole function of the first paragraph. So, I was pleased to learn about your product marketing opportunities with Federated Company. Your listing was located through our Career and Internship Services office, or I found this on Simply Hired, or I found this on our College Central Network listing at ETSU. Wherever you found the job, let them know what you're applying for and how you learned about it. After reading your corporate information, I believe that your culture of individual accomplishment and customer service, that's resoundingly American. When you read about the culture of the United States, I'm going to show you a resource later that has some more international information for US students who are interested in studying abroad, or for international students that are interested in finding a work experience in the United States. And when you read the culture of the United States, what it says is that our culture is really based on individualism, competitiveness, hard work, success, and historically, that's what has driven the American economy. And there's an interesting way that you notice that. If you meet, I'll ask this question generally, anybody can answer it. If you meet somebody for the first time in your country, what do you talk about? Anybody?
The weather.
The weather. That's a universal cop-out. What country are you from?
Canada.
Canada. Oh, of course you talk about the weather. It's really cold today. Yes, it always is.
I'm just throwing you off.
It's fine. I need to be picked on a little bit. Anybody?
You probably want to exchange your name first, right?
You want to exchange names, and then what?
Basic information.
Basic information, like where you're from? Does your family live here? That kind of thing?
Not so personal. But
Not so personal. Okay, what basic information like? I like your car. Is that your car? No, it's somebody else's. Oh, well, it's a nice car. Anyone? Specifically, what do you talk about? What do you do for a living? And where's that? What
Country?
country?
France.
France.
Yeah.
Gosh, you've been Americanized. In the United States, typically if you're at a party in the evening or with a group of people, one of the first questions you're asked is, what do you do? I went to the doctor's office yesterday because I had to have my standard annual checkup. And the nurse said to me, oh, I know your wife. And I said, yes, she comes here too. You're at ETSU, right? And I said, yes, I am. Well, what do you do there? I said, I'm Director of Career Services. That's the first question that people generally ask about one another in the United States. What do you do? It's that focus on work as being such an important thing. So, I got off on a little bit of a tangent, but he's talking about the corporate culture. That's motivating to me. So what this says to the reader is a couple of things. First of all, it doesn't say, I am writing to apply for, because that's what everybody says, right? Oh, wow. Really? Is that why you sent me a cover letter? No. I was pleased to learn. I was excited to find your listing or your vacancy for this position. So if you say I was pleased, I was excited, I'm happy to apply for this position, right away you're making an emotional statement that has an impact. This is something I really want to do. Does that make sense? So, don't start off with just the typical wording that you see in most examples or most cover letters. Put a little spirit in it. And this shows that as an applicant, I've read your website and I've read about your corporate culture. It could be a product line, it could be their 10-year success rate, it could be anything that impresses you as something that you think is pretty neat about this company or this organization or this nonprofit, whatever you're applying for. In May, I will graduate with a business degree, and I'm intent on pursuing my specialization in sales and marketing. This is based on an actual cover letter from a couple of years ago, and the person went into sales and marketing. But that's not an objective statement. That's the position they're applying for, right? He's saying, I really want to do this. Okay, in the middle paragraph, this is where you start to market yourself. So you can write one middle paragraph, you can write two. I guess that's a bimodal curve, right? Two middles. Anyway, as outlined on the enclosed resume, I've worked to make my student years productive, etc. I'm not going to read through this because you can, but he's talking about his work experiences as they fit the position he's applying for. Here's a neat thing to say. I believe that I've developed the skills and knowledge that will quickly enable me to become a contributing member of a company like Federated. So one of the things that people want to know is, are you willing to learn, and do you learn quickly? In other words, if I hire you and start paying you money, how quickly will you become a productive employee? So that's a helpful observation to make. And I don't want you to all write the same cover letter. I'm just giving you some, a few ideas here. In closing, keep it simple. Thank you for your time in reviewing my credentials. What does that do? It transfers the attention back to the reader, back to the employer. You're saying, thank you. I appreciate you paying some attention to me. And I look forward to hearing from you and hope that we will soon have the opportunity to meet for a personal interview. Simple, direct, onto the resume, which is where you want them to go. Okay, any questions about the cover letter? Is it me or the heat? Yes, ma'am.
We only cover the internship we have worked before. We don't cover the things like RGP or former university.
Okay. The answer is no. You don't have to stick just to your internship. And typically, if you have a good GPA, a solid GPA, which I define in general as a 3.0 or higher, you can list that under your degree where you put, remember, education came first in the sample. That's a good place to list your GPA. And you can also list undergraduate research. If you've done one research project, you can put it there. You can list some specific courses if you're applying for a technical position and you've had courses that qualify you for that. If you do, please say selected courses as opposed to relevant courses, which I see a lot, because relevant courses means that the rest of the courses I took aren't relevant. Selected courses. So does that answer your question? Yeah. Now, some companies, you'll see them ask for a 3.6, a 3.8. Why do they do that? It's because for a lot of jobs today, it's a highly competitive market for new graduates. They're just thinning everybody out right in the beginning because they don't want to read 1,000 resumes. They want to read 100. So let's set it at 3.6. There's nothing magical about that. And typically with large corporations like the Fortune 500, the really big companies, when they say 3.6, they mean it. That's it. You either have it or you don't. With some smaller companies, they may ask for a 3.6, but if you have a 3.4 or 5, apply anyway, because with small companies, if you're a good applicant, they're going to be interested in you, and sometimes it's a little artificial. So, my advice is, if in doubt, apply. You've got nothing to lose, really. Well, stamps are getting more expensive, but beyond that, you're going to apply online anyway, so you don't even have to lose a stamp. Okay, preparing for the interview. So interviews, the first thing you see is that interviews come in a lot of different styles. And I very often talk with people who are surprised. Gosh, I went into a room and there were 5 people sitting there, and they never asked me any questions about my resume or my experience. They just asked me about things, about how I would react to a bunch of different situations. I never expected that. That's called a behavioral interview, and again, we'll talk a little bit more about it, question sets in a few minutes, but expect anything when you go into an interview. Expect anything. It can be a one-on-one interview. It can be a one-on-one interview 3 times over. It can be a group interview. It may include an invitation to have lunch with the people that you would be working with. It may not. If you apply for a position in higher education, your interview may last 2 days, 3 days. It all depends. So there are a lot of variations on the theme. The way to prepare for an interview is to understand what's really going on there and study some question sets and learn about them. One of the handouts is 150 popular questions. Please don't knock yourself out by trying to come up with excellent answers to all of those, but read through it and see what it is that you might be challenged with and give that some thought in terms of preparing yourself. Research the company, try to talk with someone on the inside if you can. That's called networking. So if you're applying to an institution like ETSU and you know or can get to know a student or faculty member here, that's a chance to ask some questions. What is the campus like? What do people talk about? How's the new football team going? Do people think that's important? Are people excited about it? What's going on? How do you feel about being a student there? Whatever comes to mind. Because you start to gather that information, then you start to develop some familiarity and pick up some facts that you can use in the interview. But by all means, if nothing else, go to the website and read it. Read every part of the website. What kind of jobs are they hiring for in general, in addition to the one that you're applying for? Research their stock price. How are they doing in the market? What does it say about their product line? What does it say about their growth over time? Because at some point in the interview, somebody's going to say to you, what do you want to ask me? You can take notes on some of those things that you find interesting to you personally and ask about it. In some ways, it's like a role in a play. You'll feel more confident if you know the lines. I think that's a good way to look at this whole thing about interview questions. Practice helps. So you can come to Career Services and we will spend an hour with you doing a practice interview if you'd like to do that. We can even videotape it and give you some feedback in terms of your responses and some advice that might be helpful or not. That's entirely up to you. But we find that most people that come in for interview practice really think that it's been a great experience and they've learned some things that are helpful to them. So I encourage you to do that. If you don't come to see us, practice with one another. Talk to a friend, a classmate, an acquaintance, somebody whose opinion you respect, who will give you some honest feedback. There are basically 3 questions in every interview. Can you do the job? Will you do the job? And do you fit? So let me quickly explain that. Can you do the job is, do you have the basic skills to do this job? And when somebody invites you in for an interview, they've essentially already decided that you do. That's why you're there. So that question has largely been answered. They may do a little follow-up, but they've decided you can do this job. So then the other focus is, will you do the job? What does that mean? Will you do it? What that means is, are you really interested in this position? Do you want this job? Is this what you're looking for? Where do you want to be in a couple of years? Are you going to stay with this? Are you going to be a dedicated and reliable employee? Because job searches are expensive, so people want to hire someone that's going to stay with the company and be productive. The do you fit is a much more difficult question. That question has a couple of dimensions to it. Do you fit? Are you the kind of person that would work well with other people here in this group? You seem to be. Do you seem to be like the kind of person that I, as a hiring manager, would like to work with every day? There's very little that you can do to influence that, and that's why I tell people if you apply for positions and you aren't selected, that doesn't mean that you are not a good applicant. It doesn't mean that you're not a viable candidate for a job. It just means that you haven't found this fit yet. So go on to the next application. In fact, in a job search, you should always have multiple applications out, even after you have a job offer. Don't stop. Because that job offer, there's always some chance that it might vanish in a budget cut. Things can change. So stay in the job search until you have an actual position. Any questions? Yes, sir.
Considering that point, if you do get an offer, and you strongly expect to get that offer, but you do keep looking, and there's this other offer that comes up a few days later that you think is more advantageous and more what you're looking for. What are the ethics, the code of ethics here? Is there still a way for me to turn down that first offer that I kind of accepted?
That's an excellent question, and I would say that in general, people who accept the job and then back out, there is an ethical question about that. And if an employer makes you a job offer and then cancels it, we have big problems with that in my business. We don't care for it at all. Because we think that an employer has an obligation to ensure that they have a stable position before they offer it to somebody. So that's the general perspective. I would say that if the jobs are roughly comparable, stay with the first one. If the second one is overwhelmingly better, then you may want to have a conversation with the hiring manager about that. First, analyze why you think it's better, because maybe some of those opportunities that you think are better in the second offer are opportunities that will in fact be created for you in the first. You see what I'm saying? So at least have a conversation about it. Don't just write a letter and say, sorry, I'm moving on. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
I would like to know the best way to answer a question like this in an interview.
Mm-hmm.
Like you went for an interview and you were asked, okay, after like 6 months of getting this job, what guarantee do you have for us that when you get a better offer from another place, you would not leave this particular job?
Okay, so as I understand your question, if an employer asks you, how do we know that you would stay with us if you get a better job offer in 6 months? Is that?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Well, my answer to that would be that I am seriously interested in this position. I consider it to be an excellent professional opportunity. I'm certainly not going to be back in the job market anytime soon if I'm accepted for this position. So that seems unlikely to me, something like that. That doesn't mean that you're ever locked into a position that you don't want or are unhappy with or don't feel you're being successful at, but try to find a way to ensure the employer that you will be staying. Another good answer is I don't think that 6 months is enough time to even be really settled in and have a thorough understanding of what it takes to be a highly successful employee, which is what I want to be. So I don't think I'll be leaving in 6 months by any stretch of the imagination, something like that. Make sense?
Yeah, it does. I don't feel like I was asked to be more specific. Like, would I be able to stay with them for like a year or two? They just want to give them a number of years. Like, I said I didn't know, but now at that particular point I was confused. Like, I had to be specific with the number of years I would stay with them because, like I heard, they've had people that perform intelligently well in interviews like that.
Yes.
So their background is quite different from what they want, but because they were better applicants, they employ them.
Yes.
Then after a while or some months or something like that, they get to move on. So they want assurance is like, so when I give a similar response like that,
Yes.
somebody from the interview said again,
Mhm.
one of the interviewers said, can you be specific?
Can you be specific?
Yes.
I would just say that, you know, I really consider this to be a strong professional opportunity, and I'm committed to staying in this position and growing with this company. Can you be specific is an unfair question in a lot of ways. I would almost be tempted to say, but this is just me, it's not professional advice. I will stay for the period of time that you will guarantee me a job. So if you will guarantee that you'll keep me employed for 3 years, then I'll guarantee that I'll stay. They won't do it. So, you know, I had that conversation with another student, and her issue was, I'm interviewing with a hospital, but my husband's going to be graduating from medical school in a year, and I may have to leave. But I don't really want to talk about that. So my response to her was that your ethical responsibility as an applicant is to be honest about your qualifications to do that job and your interest in it and your willingness to do it. Market yourself. In the United States, an interviewer can't legally ask you if you're married, let alone how long or what's going on with your family. See, there are a lot of restrictions in the U.S. You can't make employment decisions based on race, ethnicity, national origin, marital status, male, female, whether you have children or whether you don't, all of those things. It's off the table. The only thing that you're supposed to hire somebody, you know, it has to be based on the criteria that are defined in the job description. That's the law. Now, in reality, as human beings, we all have some biases, and they always work their way into a human exchange of information. However, the law does provide a lot of protection for people in the United States in terms of discrimination. And that's a little off the topic, but you know, will you guarantee me that you be specific about how long you will stay? How do you know that? I mean, I don't think it's a reasonable question. So I would stick with the somewhat general answer. Okay. Moving right along, I want to talk a little bit about first impressions. So let's say you're at the stage now where you've submitted your cover letter, your resume, you've done some networking with people, you've studied the company, and they call you and say, I want to interview you. You're one of 3 people that we picked to talk to about this position. Right? What do you do then? Well, one of the first things you do is you go back and you read more about the company and you really study and learn everything you can about them so that you're ready to have a conversation in the interview, and then you find out exactly where that interview is, exactly what time you need to be there. Show up 15 minutes early or at least 10 minutes early. If you're late, you're in trouble. In fact, I know a recruiter in Knoxville, just down the road, and he makes a decision on who's going to get interviewed by his supervisor. So his supervisor always arranges to meet the person for lunch. And they say, join me for lunch at noon at this restaurant, right? If somebody comes in at 12:01, he's gone. He's not there. He says to the hostess on the way out, tell them they're late. So some people are very adamant about it, but it's just not wise ever to show up for that kind of opportunity late, because it tells somebody you haven't really planned ahead, you haven't taken care of all the details. If you're coming late to the interview, you probably won't be able to make it to work. So you get there, and you're meeting somebody for the first time, and they're interviewing you, right? This is where it gets to be fun. You still have to multitask now. There's a lot going on. Does anybody want to come up and shake my hand? Anyone? Ah, now I'm offended. Come on, Carla.
There's some water for you, too.
Thank you. You could tell I was losing my voice, right?
Well, it's hot in here.
Carla, I'm Dave McGee. It's good to meet you. Thank you. Look forward to talking with you today. She did. Was that good?
It was terrible. You can say it.
Was she good? She did 3 things very well. This is what I mean by multitasking. She shook my hand, gave me a nice business handshake. She looked me in the eye, and she smiled. Got to do all of those things at once.
And you want to turn off your devices when you're in an interview.
I read a story once about an interviewer who almost broke down because he was interviewing a new graduate and his telephone rang in his pocket. And he picked it up and said, "Hi, Mom. Yeah, things are going great." True story. Do you think they were at that point? Probably not. So, about this handshake thing. When you shake somebody's hand, here's the secret. Make sure that you connect at the base of the thumb. And then a firm handshake, look them in the eye, smile. Stand up straight. Keep your shoulders back. Give yourself some height. Give yourself some presence. Why? Because that says, I'm a professional person, and I'm confident in myself. Whereas this says, I'm not so sure, but I'm going to take a shot at this. Hi. You understand what I'm saying. People form first impressions of one another very quickly, within seconds, and they tend to be durable. They tend not to change. So in a large sense, you're determining the success or failure of your interview with that first handshake. Make a bad impression, you may not recover. If you make a great impression, it's gonna stay with that person and everyone else that you meet during the day. So be very aware of that. What you carry is part of your dress. So if you're carrying an electronic device, a notebook, a purse, anything, make sure it matches. Make sure it's new and attractive and fits your dress. Be conscious of your posture. We talked about that. And the secret of the good handshake. The other question is, what do you wear when you go to an interview? Does anybody want to hazard a guess? How do you dress for an interview? Professionally. What does that mean? Shirt, trousers, yeah. At least. Maybe even a tie. Maybe even one of these, which I'm not going to put on because it's too hot. But seriously, for men, you want to wear a tie and jacket and a white shirt or a light pastel and matching trousers. For women, a nice pantsuit or a matching skirt, blouse, and jacket. And again, some kind of a pastel or white blouse. Women have some other complications. So the advice is this: stay light on the jewelry. Don't go in wearing a lot of jewelry. If you have any things like large earrings, or if you want to wear earrings, keep them small and simple. And don't wear any kind of perfume or cologne, because you never know whether somebody is going to be offended by that or have an allergy. You don't want to interview with somebody who's sneezing for half an hour. Yeah, it's just not fun. So keep it simple. And that goes for everything. If you have your nails colored, have them uncolored and just have like a plain gloss or a very, very light pastel color. Don't be bright and flashy about anything because that detracts from a professional look. Yes, sir?
Do you have any specific tips for Skype or online interviews?
Skype or online interviews?
Yes, there's something that, I can't do dress-wise, for example. Is it appropriate to not jacket on, for example, or,
Sure, I would still wear a tie though.
Any other thing that, comes into your
Yeah, pretend that you're talking to a live person and keep your eye contact on that person. And that person is going to be where the camera is located, not the center of the screen, which doesn't mean that you can't ever move your eyes around, but because it's abnormal in a conversation to just stare at somebody, right? But you want to maintain eye contact in general, especially when you're answering a question. So look directly at them. Maintain your posture, sit up straight, because again, you want to convey professionalism. If you're slouched over, it'll be noticeable. If you're mumbling or acting tired, it'll be noticeable. So treat it very much like an in-person interview. Even in a telephone interview, my advice to people is, if somebody calls you and wants to do a preliminary interview with you over the phone, what they're doing is they're screening out people. They're looking for reasons to screen people out so that they can decide who they're going to invite in. So I always tell people this: keep a list of the jobs you applied for by your phone. Name of the company, the job title, and some notes about it, so that when that call comes, you won't be surprised or mystified by a company that's calling that you applied to 3 months ago and you're just hearing from them. It happens. So keep that information, and then as you talk on the phone, stand up. Stand up straight. You can pace around if you want to, keep yourself in motion. But if you're standing up, your voice will sound more professional and you'll project your voice better. If you sit down in your game chair and put your feet up, you're going to sound laid back. Maybe a little too laid back.
If I could just interject on the Skype interviews or any kind of video interviews.
Sure.
Also check lighting, because that will help as well. You want to make sure it's bright enough that you will see, and it's okay to practice with a friend and get the lighting however you want. But that's always really good to do as well.
Thank you. Excellent point. Yeah, I'm sure that you've all seen photographs and videos where it's distracting because all the light's shining on one side of the person's head and you can't see the other side. So that even lighting is an excellent point when you're sitting in front of a computer. In most office situations, you're going to have that even lighting prearranged for you. But at home, or actually any place, it's something that you have to be conscious of and watch. So thank you for that. Anybody else have any insights? Skype?
Just be prepared for any eventuality. I did a Skype interview one time and I lost the video, but luckily I remembered where everybody was sitting. So I that might or might not have happened when I interviewed for this position.
Ah.
Just saying. It did happen. So for some reason I had everything all set, and then something happened, and I was using my phone because I didn't, that was the only thing I had. I had a camera that was working, and so something happened, and the video lost, and I was pissed, but I pretended like it was still there, and I was, yes, Michelle, thank you. That sounds good. So just kind of try to make sure that it starts off okay. And kind of, if you could remember where people were sitting and the names.
Right,
and
yeah.
just fake it. That's what I did.
Good
Guess
for
it
you.
worked.
That's great. It did, huh? Okay.
Well,
Yeah, so it goes beyond knowing your lines and being conscious of your image as well. These are some behavioral interview questions. Common interview questions we've largely talked about. And again, you have a long list of these. But I want to talk for just a moment about behavioral interview questions, and then we'll wrap up pretty quickly. So, behavioral interview questions are always about a situation that you were in that was challenging or difficult, or had some kind of a challenge connected to it. and what you did to deal with it and what the outcome was. So I tell people, if you're asked a behavioral question, think about it in terms of the STAR system. Situation, task, or task, think of task as challenge, action, and result. Situation, task, action, result. When was the last time you had a disagreement with someone? How did you handle it? So, the answer to the question is, well, this was the situation. I was out with a friend and we were going, we had decided that we were going to go out to a restaurant and have some Mexican food, but at the last minute he wanted to go to a different restaurant. And I was disappointed because I was really looking forward to having Mexican food. So we had a little bit of a disagreement about that, but what we did was we talked about it. And he said, well, you know, we agreed that we were going out for Mexican, so I'd like to do that tonight, and we'll go to the other restaurant next time. And it was fine. Now, that's an oversimplified example, but, and some questions are going to be a whole lot more difficult. Look at number 2. Tell me about a time when you were asked to do something you did not know how to do, but thought you should know. How did you respond? What's that question about anyway? Anybody have a guess? Why would somebody ask you that?
See if you're honest, if you will lie maybe to get the job.
Honesty is a big part of it. So that's a good answer. But here's what else is going on from the perspective of an employer. You're a new employee. You have an assignment, but you don't really know exactly what I'm looking for when I give you the assignment. What are you going to do? Are you going to fake it? Take a chance? Give me something I don't want? Or are we going to discuss it? So the how did you respond is, well, I was given an assignment in class that was very important. It was 30% of my grade. And I wasn't entirely clear about all aspects of that assignment. I talked to the professor so that I had a better understanding. And I completed the assignment successfully. So again, it's situation, task, the action I took, the result I achieved. And typically you want to talk about situations, pick situations where you did have a positive outcome, because if you outline a list of disasters, somebody's going to have a question about that. Describe a time when one of your friends was dishonest in front of other friends. What was your response? What was the last time you became angry with someone? How did you express your anger? Well, I assaulted the person, and after being in prison for 3 weeks, my anger was over. No, seriously. These are all about interpersonal relationships, decision-making, the kind of judgment that you've shown in the past. And with large companies, sometimes the only questions they ask are behavioral. They've hired a consultant that gave them a set of behavioral questions, and they ask them. And then you talk with somebody else later in the day, and they'll ask you behavioral questions, and they're different questions, but they sound strangely familiar. That's because they're looking for consistency, they're looking for a pattern of behavior, and it's all based on the theory that your past behavior, if I can understand your past behavior, I'll understand your future behavior. So that's why behavioral questions have become more popular. And you generally will find a few of these thrown in, even if you're in a traditional interview situation. Closing the interview, this is a lot of this is common sense, but thank everyone. Follow up quickly with a thank you note. Some people think this is terribly old-fashioned, but handwritten notes are still valued. Trust me on this. Why? Because nobody does it anymore. Everything is email, message, right? I don't even know if my own son can write anymore by hand. I haven't seen that in so long. But anyway, if you write somebody a handwritten note, it can be very simple. I enjoyed the interview and meeting everyone at the company. I consider this to be an excellent professional opportunity. Thank you for your time. I very much look forward to hearing from you. It's that simple. It doesn't have to be a long, complicated note, but get it out quickly. Get it back to them right away, the same day if you can, but within a couple of days at most. And then follow up after an appropriate time to reaffirm your interest. What do you think that is? What's an appropriate time? There's no answer. I would say that if you don't have any idea what the agenda or timeline of the employer is, then give them about 3 weeks and then call and ask to talk to the hiring manager or whoever you interviewed with and ask this question. Well, first of all, you start with a statement, but you know, I interviewed with you for X position 3 weeks ago, and I want you to know that it's a position I'm really interested in. I consider it to be the right opportunity for me. Do you have a timeline for making a decision about who you're going to hire for this position? Or what is your timeline for making a decision? Whatever you feel comfortable with. Don't ask, are you going to hire me? Because you might get an answer you don't like on the spot. You know, maybe they just haven't decided. They may be waiting for the business office to sign off on it, whatever. You never know what's going on the other side of the equation, which is one of the things that makes the job search a little bit stressful. But it's okay to inquire. Just ask about the timeline, not yourself personally. Very often, the employers will tell you, we'll be making a decision, or we expect to make a decision in 3 weeks. And if they tell you that, they mean it. But it doesn't mean they will, because what happens is that there are a lot of intervening variables. Somebody on the search committee gets ill, or a couple of people are. Things just work slower than they expected them to go. There are a lot of things that can come up. But typically as an applicant, you sit there thinking, they don't like me. The sun's come up again, they really don't like me. It doesn't mean that. It means that they just have, for whatever reason, haven't made a decision, and again, it's impossible to know what that reason is. So, here's my advice to you in terms of next steps. If you haven't already, write a resume and a sample cover letter. If you have done it, bring it in to us and meet with somebody for a review. And let me just tell you quickly why that review is important. You don't want errors on it. And very often it's hard to write that clear, concise bullet point that's going to get your message across, because when we think about what we've done and write about it, we have a video in our head, right? We know exactly what it was. We were there. So we write something down and we think it's crystal clear. But the reader, who knows nothing about what you know, only knows what you write. So we tend not to cover some things that we ought to be saying typically, or we say something that's not as clear as we believe it is. I tell people this, I edited at this point well over 1,500 resumes, but I still won't send one out without having it edited, and that's my own, because we all do this. So getting feedback is very important. Consult a competent professional. That would be us. Come see us. No, seriously. Make sure it's reviewed by somebody who knows about resumes and knows how to advise you. Practice your interview skills, and that list of 150 questions I gave you is a great place to start. A good reference source. You've got this, it's on your printed material. QuintCareers.com, that's where that question set came from. They even have some sample answers on there. The reason I don't hand out the question set with answers is that there are a lot of answers that they came up with that I find to be a little off the mark. So, but it's a great site to just learn more about the job search and get all kinds of advice. Research all employers before you interview. Just a reminder. One of the biggest complaints we hear from employers is this person does not know what job they're interviewing for or why they want to work for this company. So they're not going to go on in the interview process. And it's very easy to do today. So I have talked for an hour. You've been a good audience. So I'm going to give you a choice. We have another speaker, Lisa, who's here to talk with you about legal status and OPT and H-1B visas. And she's here and anxious and ready to go. So we can move on, or I can show you a few online resources that we have. What's your preference? What would you say if you were in a situation where the speaker asked you what you wanted to do next? How would you deal with that?
Get more information on the immigration and the H-1B visa.
You want to move on? Okay. Well, I am pleased to have the chance to talk with you this afternoon, and our office is in Culp on the second floor in an area called the Arc. It's right past the student card office. You can call ahead and make a 1-hour appointment, and we'll sit down and talk just with you about your job search. In fact, you can make 3 1-hour appointments if you like. Or if you just want your resume reviewed, we have walk-in hours most of the week. So you can just walk in with your resume, and there will be somebody there to look at it with you. Okay? Thank you.